am I supposed to live here now, huh? My whole house smells like toe cheese and dry cleaning.
Because you didn't follow my instructions.
Oh, well, how?
I've already explained in depth what Gojo is able to do and how he's able to do it in previous videos, so if you want a more detailed explanation, go watch my Goku vs Gojo video. But in short, Gojo is able to manipulate space-time on the atomic level using his curse technique, bringing a concept called infinity into reality. Using infinity, Gojo is able to divide space and slow something down to the point where it never actually reaches him. If you need a more visual example of this, just think of like Achilles and the tortoise, which Gojo actually mentions directly in the manga. The paradox goes that if Achilles raced a tortoise that had a head start but had to stop at every halfway point, he would never actually catch up to the tortoise, since there would always be another halfway point, and he would create a sequence of infinite halfway points that get perpetually smaller and smaller, but never actually reaching the tortoise. The only difference being that in the case of JJK, Gojo is the tortoise and you are Achilles, and Gojo is going to rock your shit more than likely. That's not to say that there's no way to bypass Gojo's infinity. There are multiple ways you can do it actually. For one, any attack that ignores or destroys space-time would bypass infinity. Similarly, if you have infinite speed or above, you would also get through infinity. This is because if you have infinite speed, you would be traveling infinitely fast, so even if infinity divided space upon itself an infinite number of times, you would still get to Gojo regardless. This is kind of a shortened, abridged version of Gojo's abilities. Again, I highly recommend my Goku vs Gojo video, but yeah, that's the basic gist of it. There are some alternate interpretations of Limitless, like some people believe that you can just speed blitz the whole thing if you can speed blitz Gojo's perception, since during the hidden inventory arc it does kind of imply that, or some people believe that just basically outscaling Gojo would be enough, but I personally don't buy into either of these interpretations myself. In terms of actual scaling, Gojo is consistently stated to be the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer, meaning he should pretty much objectively scale above everything else in the series. The only character that Gojo arguably wouldn't scale above would be Sukuna, since even Gojo seems to think that he was holding back during their fight. But you could definitely debate that. There's a few different interpretations of what he actually means there, and they should be at least relative to each other, so any feats Sukuna performs, Gojo could likely also perform. Now, whenever someone plays the Gojo is the strongest card, it will undoubtedly attract people that think that he scales above Yuki's black hole. And for the sake of the video and to play devil's advocate for a little bit, I will be using that interpretation. After all, there have been multiple techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen that grant sorcerers a level of strength or speed that the average sorcerer does not have, and they usually always have an asterisk right next to them, with the exception of Satoru Gojo. Similarly, Yuki's black hole could just fall under this as well. There's also other little bits of clues, like Yuta referring to Limitless as omnipotent and flawless, when no such praise is ever given to Yuki, and you could even argue that Yuki really isn't worthy of being a special grade sorcerer outside of her black hole, and with Gojo being referred to as not just the strongest sorcerer, but specifically the strongest special grade sorcerer, you could make a pretty decent argument for Gojo scaling above Yuki's black hole, at least in my opinion. Although you could just interpret all of these differently, like for example, Yuta is stated to actually have more cursed energy than Gojo, but Gojo has the 6 eyes, and he also has infinity, meaning that Yuta will never touch him, so in an actual fight between the two, Gojo would still win. So you could argue that Gojo's title as the strongest sorcerer is just referring to him in an actual fight. For example, if Gojo were to fight Yuki, Gojo would win because, well, obvious reasons. Now, how would Gojo respond to a black hole that could just kind of destroy the planet? I don't know. But considering the fact that Gojo is up against a Dragon Ball character, I'm feeling a little generous today. In terms of speed, Gojo should be relative to Sukuna, who is able to dodge Kashimo's electromagnetic waves point blank, which move at the speed of light. Not to mention, this was a heavily exhausted Sukuna that had just gotten off of the Gojo fight, meaning you could argue that a Gojo and Sukuna at their peak would be multiple times faster than this. Overall, with the scaling we've given him so far, we got a Gojo that scales to large planet level with faster than light combat and reaction speeds. I don't want to say Chiaotzu scaling is interesting per se, because it's Chiaotzu. I mean, I would be lying to you if I said that it was at all engaging, but there is at least a little bit of nuance to it in the sense that Chiaotzu has never really won a fight ever. I mean, in OG Dragon Ball, Chiaotzu has exactly one fight, and it's against Kid Krillin, and he didn't even win that. His final fight in the original Dragon Ball manga was against Nappa, where he basically blew himself up, did no damage, and was pretty much pointless the entire time. They literally stopped inviting him to battles because because he's just too weak to keep up. The Dragon Ball Z anime did give him a little bit of love though, as when the Ginyu Force are invited to King Kai's planet for training, Chiaotzu is able to take on Goldo and overpower him very easily. Goldo being a character that was weaker than both Gohan and Krillin during their fight on Namek. That's pretty much his only relevant feat though. Everything after this is either unquantifiable or fodder. In the Dragon Ball Super anime, he's able to briefly sort of maybe hold base Goku back a little bit, but even then it's kind of sad to watch. And the Dragon Ball Super manga doesn't show him at all until the Moro arc, and then he has like one fight against a guy. We don't know how strong this guy is either, so it's just a guy. Yeah, for this video, the safest bet is probably going to be scaling Chiaotzu off of Goldo, and then just assuming he's vaguely above wherever that would be. As while it is likely that he got more powerful after this, it's not enough to make him even remotely relevant. I mean, even Yamcha showed up to fight the androids, and it's just unquantifiable. Like I said before, Chiaotzu was able to easily defeat Goldo, who, according to guidebooks, was actually weaker than both Krillin and Gohan during their fight on Namek, both of which had power levels of 13,000 and 14,000 respectively, meaning that Goldo's power level is likely above 10,000, but no greater than 13,000, and Chiaotzu's able to overpower him pretty easily. This general range of power likely means that Goldo scales relative to King Vegeta, potentially a little stronger or a little weaker depending on your interpretation. We know that from the original Bardock Father of Goku special that Bardock's power level was approaching 10,000, and King Vegeta is stated to be the strongest Saiyan at the time of Planet Vegeta's destruction. However, we know that King Vegeta's power level was likely vastly lower than 18,000, as Vegeta remarks that he surpassed his father as a young boy in the manga. Vegeta during the Saiyan saga having a power level of 18,000 when he is very clearly an adult, putting King Vegeta in a similar tier where he's above a power level of 10,000 but likely way lower than a power level of 18,000. All of this is important because King Vegeta is a character that can casually destroy multiple planets with a wave of his hand, with calcs online putting this anywhere from large planet level to even large star level depending on how generous you are. In terms of speed, Chiaotzu confidently scales over potential light speed feats from OG Dragon Ball, like Goku in the Red Ribbon Army Saga reacting to beam guns, or Goku in the 22nd Tenkaichi being able to react to Ten Shinhan's light speed fury punches or the solar flare, which is a light-based technique. Characters would then get many times stronger and faster, with characters like Raditz and Nappa being potentially dozens to hundreds of times the speed of light. However, especially in the anime continuity, Dragon Ball gets a massive speed upgrade from this point on, as Goku on his way to Namek was able to easily dodge and react to meteors that were heading straight for him while trying to repair his ship. Given the fact that Namek is stated to be in a completely different part of the universe, and it took Goku's spaceship 6 days to get from Earth to Namek, calcs have put this anywhere from 213 times the speed of light to potentially quadrillions of times the speed of light, with guidebooks likely implying that Goku's power level around this time was 10,000, meaning that Chiaotzu would indeed scale to this. Really, the only other thing we need to mention for Chiaotzu is the fact that he actually does have a pretty notable hacks ability, the fact that he can use psychic powers. The first time we saw this ability was during the 22nd Tenkaichi when Chiaotzu was able to attack Krillin's internal organs directly. The ability would then evolve to the point where Chiaotzu was actually able to create psychic attacks and even detonate himself using his psychic abilities, with there being potential implications with Vegeta's dirty fireworks technique that Chiaotzu can actually just blow someone up from the inside if they're weak enough, which I do actually think is the case.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
If you've been paying attention, there's already a pretty massive stat difference between the two, with Chiaotzu just objectively being way stronger and way faster. Even using the lowest reasonable interpretation for King Vegeta's planet-busting feat, that would still clock in at large planet level, matching Yuki's black hole in terms of energy output. Except King Vegeta was able to do that with a simple wave of his hand, whereas Yuki needed to sacrifice herself for a similar result, meaning that Chiaotzu outscales the entire verse with a simple wave of his hand. On top of this, even lowballed, Chiaotzu is multiple dozens of times, if not hundreds to even quadrillions of times faster. Even highballing Gojo to be potentially dozens of times the speed of light, if you assume that Sukuna was just absolutely exhausted when he fought Kashimo, that still really wouldn't change the outcome. Chiaotzu would still hold a very clear strength and speed advantage, meaning that Gojo would need to pretty much exclusively rely on his hacks abilities. However, even that isn't enough to save him. While it's true that Chiaotzu can't bypass infinity in the conventional sense, you gotta remember that Chiaotzu's psychic abilities are able to attack internal organs directly, and he might even be able to just blow up Gojo from the inside out. If both of them were in character, Chiaotzu would likely just start the fight by giving Gojo some pretty painful stomach cramps, in which Gojo would realize that his infinity isn't going to be worth squat during this. Gojo would then be in for a rude awakening as he realizes that this small little doll thing vastly outstats him, by multiple dozens of times at bare minimum, if not potentially quadrillions of times, in which Gojo would likely resort to one of his two win cons, which I purposefully left out of his section as I wanted to talk about them at the end of the video. Number 1, Hollow Purple. As we established earlier, Gojo's abilities work on the atomic level, meaning that his technique Blue and his technique Reversal Red also work on the atomic level. Hollow Purple is the combination of red and blue, both of which essentially embody the concepts of push and pull. So if Gojo were to hit you with a Hollow Purple, your atoms would be pushed and pulled in all different directions, scattering your entire existence across space. Ordinarily, whenever I compare Gojo to Dragon Ball, I say that Hollow Purple wouldn't work, as in Dragon Ball Super, Goku in his base form is able to punch away an attack that would disintegrate people on the subatomic level. However, that is something that Chiaotzu actually doesn't scale to, and in fact, there are multiple statements from OG Dragon Ball all the way up to the Trunks saga that characters can indeed be reduced to atoms. Even characters like Mecha Frieza are very vulnerable to Hollow Purple, and considering the fact that Chiaotzu scales way below that, if Gojo were to get off a lucky Hollow Purple on him, it would scatter Chiaotzu across space, ending the fight right there and then. There are some contentions on how Hollow Purple works exactly, since even people with no cursed energy like Toji Fushiguro are able to survive Hollow Purple for a very small amount of time. But you could just argue that this is another Jujutsu Kaisen inconsistency like Mach 3 Maki. There's also Gojo's second win con, which in my opinion is a lot more likely, being his domain expansion Unlimited Void. Once trapped inside, your brain is automatically injected with an immense amount of information. Even Gojo activating his domain for 0.2 seconds injected everyone's mind with 6 months worth of information, and this information is then stretched out to appear infinite inside your mind. A common misconception I see is that it actually injects infinite information into your mind, not near infinite, which is wrong. Gege Akutame, the author of JJK, highlighted in the physical volume release for the series that Unlimited Void doesn't actually inject infinite information into your mind. Instead, it's only an immense amount of information and it feels infinite to you. It's not I can see everything, it's a lot closer to I feel like I can see everything. Which, while you could argue that Goku has a counter to this with Ultra Instinct, Chiaotzu does not. So if Gojo got off one domain expansion or one lucky Hollow Purple, that's all it would take to end the fight with Chiaotzu. However, Chiaotzu is way faster than Gojo and could probably just speed blitz him before he's able to get either of his potential win cons off. In conclusion,
We already know the smell of the